Which I'm going to get into, I might call the anatomy of assassination or the politics of assassination. Assassination is a big business. In fact, assassination is the business of big business. I've written quite a bit on this subject in various magazines, and for those of you that have managed to get past some of the pictures that occur in some of those magazines, you'll know that in November issue of Genesis, I wrote on the subject of the Kennedy assassination. Just last month, March issue of Genesis, I wrote about international assassinations, and I have to write 5 months ahead of time. I have an article completed and in the mail on the 24th of March on assassinations, in which I talked about the possibility of further assassinations in the Middle East. And as I went to the post office on the 25th with a newspaper under my arm about the assassination of King Faisal, I had the intention of taking the article back home and bringing it up to date. You see, it's that kind of a subject. What was your first thought when you read about the assassination of King Faisal? What goes through the minds of the perpetrators of assassinations? Are we again confronted with a young man that was a lone nut who kept a diary and friends on a grassy knoll down there in Saudi Arabia? Or was the king killed by some sort of a machine or conspiracy that had other plans for actions in the Middle East? Mr. Kissinger had left the Middle East the day before. Mr. Nixon had tallied in Dallas until the morning of the assassination. So there's a theme running through these things that the king is dead. But what is the meaning then of the controls that go through these things? In this case, the resumption of power in Saudi Arabia almost seemed to be a little too even, too easy. What had really happened there? And I think what had really happened there will give us a picture of what goes on in assassinations, how they come about, and then we can take that kind of a picture and begin to unravel some of the others, and we might come a little closer to the mark. Technically, what happened in Saudi Arabia is that the king's guard, the king's elite, was broken. Now, you can keep a man alive. If you don't believe that, read your history of General de Gaulle. Even in the deepest and darkest days of World War II, there were thousands of people who would like to have had a shot at de Gaulle. I remember after the Cairo conference in Marrakech, Morocco, Churchill was recovering from a bout with influenza, and de Gaulle came to visit him several times. You can't imagine the security precautions that were taken in Morocco to keep the good general alive. I was in Lima, Peru in March of 1964 when de Gaulle came and captivated the country of Peru. Hundreds of thousands of Peruvians filled Plaza de Armas to such an extent that they were pressing against the walls and trampling the trees. And yet, General de Gaulle, who a good many inches taller than I am, walked among these Peruvians that night with searchlights on him in that huge arena among hundreds of thousands of people. And there wasn't a person took a shot at him. Because in the 6 months before he went to Lima, the people whose business it was to keep de Gaulle alive, the guerrillas, if you remember their term of endearment, had thoroughly worked over the city of Lima, had combed every list for people in that city who might be anti-Gaullist, had provided them with resort hotels a long way off, and had made sure that when the general came to town, he would stay alive. What is it then that keeps these people alive? In every country, the king would not live if there was not an elite guard. And who trains the elite guard? The Vanel Corporation. It seems to me that there's a point to the subject which appeared just a little while ago in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and a great number of other papers, to the effect that there had been a contract issued with the Vanel Corporation, and I don't have any idea what their corporate connections are, and the Defense Department of the United States, and the fact that the Vanel Corporation had signed this contract for the purpose of training, first of all, the National Guard of the Saudi Arabia, and National Guard there means more or less police, and the King's Elite Guard. I wonder which king they had in mind, because when you control the elite guard of a country, when you train that guard, when you arm that guard, when you teach them to jump from an airplane at Fort in Georgia, Benning, and in Fort Bragg, give them all kinds of weapons training and bring them down to Camp Perry in Virginia, where there's a nice little resort. That guard knows how to keep a man alive, as long as that guard agrees to keep that man alive.